life, and that is what got me connected with NAMI, and you know, just got me started early. And one of my passions is that I hope that families like all of us that have children or loved ones that have a mental illness don't have to go back to square one and, you know, just kind of recreate the wheel. There's so many of us with so much information that I want everybody to be having a shortcut to care for their family members and for themselves for self-care. I found a lot of what I needed through programs, and I know that a lot of you will as well. Michelle, you want to introduce yourself?
And my husband and my daughter both have been diagnosed with a mental illness. And my husband had been untreated for about 25 years, and when he was finally ready to get treatment, I found NAMI probably within the few months of each of these events happening, and it has really changed my life. So I'm so glad you all are joining us today. Well, I've got some statistics for you on mental illness, and I think they're absolutely astounding. 12% of the children in this country under age 18 have a diagnosable mental illness. 50% of the adult cases of mental illness had signs and symptoms by age 14. 3/4 of the cases of mental illness have begun by age 24. And parents and teachers can be overwhelmed by a child's mental illness. And this is where one of NAMI's newest programs, Parents and Teachers as Allies, can help. And what it is a 2-hour in-service mental health education program for teachers, administrators, school health professionals, parents, and others that are in the school community. And the program focuses on helping those school professionals and families within the school community better understand the early warning signs of mental illness in children and adolescents, and how to intervene with these youth so they can get the early intervention that they need. It also covers the lived experience of mental illnesses and how schools can communicate with families about mental health related concerns. And it's taught by a team of 4 people. The first thing that we have is the welcome and introduction. Okay. We've got an educator who is also a family member, and she welcomes the school professionals and she tells them what topics we'll be talking about. Then she tells them, if it's a she, maybe a man, in our case it's a woman, tells her personal story with her child with a mental illness. Then we go over the early warning signs of mental illness, and a presenter walks the school professionals through the early warning signs of mental illness in children and adolescents. And we follow a book called the Parents and Teachers as Allies publication, and we give these to every participant that comes to our group. It's a 30-page booklet that goes over 8 different mental illnesses in children and adolescents, as well as tips on regarding speaking with the parents and also the emotional stages chart. It's really important. The teachers don't understand that some of these emotions that they're seeing in their parents are perfectly normal reactions. They're reactions to a traumatic situation, and when we can explain that emotional stages chart and say these are not all dysfunctional families you're looking at, they're experiencing a crisis, that really helps them wrap their mind around what they're looking at. The illnesses that we cover are ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, and obsessive compulsive disorder. And then we have the family response next, and that's a parent of a child with a mental illness, goes over those emotional reactions among the family members that are dealing with raising a child with a mental illness. Then our next section is a presenter it's called Living with Mental Illness, and this is a person who has experienced the signs and symptoms of mental illness as a child and tells their experience, what was positive and what was negative. And they're encouraged, if they had a negative experience, tell the teachers what would have helped when they were in school. What could have been done differently that it would have helped them? Then we have a group discussion and the closing remarks and evaluations. And the following affiliates have the Parents and Teachers as Allies program: NAMI AOP, Beaufort County, Charleston, Greenville, Mid-Carolina, Piedmont Tri-County, and NAMI Spartanburg. And the exciting thing about this is it's really not confined only to a school setting. Betsy has done it as a modified version of the program. Do you want to tell them about the DJJ that you did?
Sure. We know that 12% of our children and adolescents have a diagnosable mental illness, more serious mental illness. And I'm in meetings all the time with folks from DJJ, well, Juvenile Justice folks. When a child enters their door, about 70% plus of our children going through that door have a mental illness. So I was approached by the director of DJJ in York County, and he said, you know, I'd love to have my staff trained. So we modified the training a little bit. Instead of having a teacher go in and tell their story and their, you know, and have the presentation done the way we do for school, we had myself, I went through the PowerPoint of what those early onset signs look like in children and adolescents. I had two parents that currently had children in the DJJ system. I had two young adults who had mental illness, I should say, and were involved with DJJ as youth, what that was like. They were overwhelmed. Their staff does not have a lot of mental health training. So when they heard what parents were dealing with at home, and when they walk in their door and say, you've got to take my child, they're incorrigible, they're thinking, you know, these are parents that may be sort of apathetic, instead of thinking, these are parents that maybe have tried just about everything. So hearing the parents tell their story and hearing these two young ladies tell their story about how they got involved with DJJ, what was going on with their life and what their mental illness was doing to them at the time, very profound. After that training, the director of DJJ came up to me and he said, you want to kick this up a notch? And I'm thinking, well, how do we kick it up a notch? And he said, I would like you to come and train the solicitor's office staff that is working with our youth and maybe have the judge there as well. That is just great stuff. The more people understand what our kids are going through, the better. And I can tell you, and Michelle will agree, this program is so important because the statistics show that 50% of our young people, our mental illnesses occur by age 14 and 3/4 by age 24. We've got to do the best job we can of trying to catch these kids at a stage 1 before, you know, when we can really do an intervention. We can do more to keep people in recovery by getting them used to taking medication, used to seeing a therapist, used to doing the things that they're going to need to do to maintain that recovery. We've just got to do a better job of catching them at stage 1. We are trying to get right now into Winthrop University to try to train some of those teachers, young teachers, before they go out in the classroom, to give them the information they need to know. If you've got 12 to 20% of these kids in your classroom, you know, in the school district, they're in your classroom. You've got to know they're in your classroom. We just did a presentation to a middle school in Clover. There are 900 students in that school. In the 55 teachers, while 55 teachers were listening to our presentation, when we got to that slide that talked about 12%, the principal jumped up and said, okay, that's about 100 and some of our kids. I mean, he jumped up right now to just kind of pull those teachers in and say, you know what? We're talking about this many of our kids in this school have these kinds of issues, and we've got to know about how we can help them and how we can try to talk to the parents without being diagnosticians. So it's a wonderful program. It's one of my more passionate, I love all of our programs. They're all, you know, one builds on the other, but this is really a way I think that we can, for 2 hours, educate a lot of people, and while these kids are really young. So I just love it.
And I feel the same way about it. Some of the comments that we have gotten numerous times when the evaluations are filled out, this is the best in-service I've been to in 20 years. This is the best service I've been to in 30 years. Think of how many in-services a teacher has been to. This is educational material they can use on the spot when they go back into their classroom after the presentation. Some of the opportunities that we're going to have in our area coming up, we've been asked sometime in the future when there's an in-service for the guardian ad litems in the county. They're working with children. They're going to court with these children, but some of them have no clue about what mental illness in a child looks like. We've been asked by DSS, maybe, would you work with our foster parents? Would you show the program to them? Also, Clemson University may be interested in having us go and educate the graduate students who are going to be new teachers. Wouldn't that be a coup for us to be able to get these brand new teachers before they ever step foot in a classroom to understand what they're going to be seeing there? And many of the teachers that you're presenting to are in tears when you look out in the audience. Some of them, their own children have a mental illness and they had no clue what the symptoms were. So this has been a real eye-opening experience everywhere we presented. So I'm with Betsy. I love all the programs, but I think this is one of my favorites as well, to see the change that happens so fast. And as you probably heard Bill mention, Betsy and I were able to go to the National Convention, and we received the Parents and Teachers as Allies Leadership Award, which was quite an honor for us to get something like that at such an early stage.
And we want to thank everybody for listening to our program presentation. Like I've said, and like Michelle has said, our volunteers are the heart of our organization. There are some people that are putting in some incredibly long hours, and some that are putting in some short hours, but they're really packed with good quality volunteerism. And we want to make sure that we know what they're doing, and that these you know, they're the lifesavers to our family members and our individuals living with a mental illness. Because we've all had one of those lifesavers in our lives.